Okay, so let's pick up where we left off on talking about ethics and persuasion. Here are the authors listed several responses to common criticisms of advertising, and kind of you would have to think through how you would respond to each of these. These are all kind of justifications that advertising is doing just what it should do, and we don't need to be so worried about it. First of all, caveat emptor, let the buyer beware. Do you remember this back like in 8th grade? We learned that phrase. And so it's, your responsibility. If you don't like what you're seeing, don't buy it. Don't listen to it. But we're all big boys and girls, and we all get to make our own decisions. So if they're not telling the full truth, well, you need to be responsible for that and not need mommy or daddy to guide you through it. Consumer stupidity. That's not their fault if you're stupid, which at a certain level, I agree, but don't we want to have some level, maybe low level, of agreement of what advertisers will or will not do? I don't want it to be the Wild West out there, but at the same time, I know that whatever I purchase or whatever I do, I am ultimately responsible. I accept that. Media literacy movement. That can facilitate better understandings of media, that they're going to fix the problems. Or economic Darwinism, bad products won't survive, so they'll take themselves out of the market, so you only have a short time to make bad consumer choices, and then they'll eventually disappear. But is there something we should do beforehand that people have to go through all that misery of where things may eventually end up, but can we spare them some loss and pain? The FCC and other watchdog groups are already regulating. Do we need more regulation? My gosh, we got enough government involvement in our lives as it is. Do we need more? Let them just do what they're doing. Everything's going fine. And then they have their own professional codes of ethics. Some of those are listed in the textbook for you. But they're monitoring themselves. Well, all of these, they're probably partially true, all of them. But I think it just seems we don't want to just leave things open, especially to those who are the most vulnerable in our society. So I think there's more that can be done and not just let things go as they go. Okay, is the use of deception ever justified? And we kind of saw this with the birthday party, the surprise party situation, that we don't just want to say that there's never a time where you can't be deceptive, but although we kind of agreed upon the issue of what is the end goal here, what is the purpose that you're after, could justify some situations. But boy, I tell you, I have even a hard time saying, yes, it's okay to lie to people, because even at a birthday party, you just seem to be opening a door that is hard to close. So, anyway, I'm not going to get into that. Most of us know the difference between lying to somebody about a birthday party versus lying to somebody about their home mortgage. So, is it ever justified? So anyway, and they have some scenarios there on the right-hand side. Would you tell the Nazis if Anne Frank was hiding in your attic? I heard one pastor one time talking about police, saying, their use of deception and undercover and all that. He says he would disagree with that, because he thinks that them doing that kind of challenges the authority of God to do things in the right way and the honest way, and just do honest police work rather than using deception. So you can take that for what it is. I think of the spies in the Old Testament, where they would go out and sneak into the city of Jericho and find out what was going on and ask the woman to hide them, and then she has to lie on their behalf, right? Remember that? So anyway, what about parents who tell their children about Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny? I had told a sermon one time where I basically demythed the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus in one shot. And nobody told me they were mad, but I can think a few people were irritated at me for doing that. We never told our children that there was an Easter Bunny or a Santa Claus, and we just tried to take a more what we thought was a more appropriate approach of just telling them the truth. And if other kids or friends believe in that, then let them go at it. But we're not going to do that here. So anyway, if your friend had got an ugly haircut, would you be brutally honest? I would just keep my mouth shut. That'd be me. But whatever. People have probably told me they don't like my hair, so they haven't told me they don't like it, even though they don't like it. All right. Then they have this scenario. I'm just going to mention this. You can leave it on your own. But how honest do you think a doctor at a hospital, an emergency situation, should be with a patient? Which of those options do you think they should take about somebody who came in who will probably never walk again? I'm looking at the list there. I would probably take the fourth one down. There is serious injury to both legs and damage to your spine. Honest, but it doesn't draw a conclusion yet. So that's the one I would pick. Which one would you pick to share with the person? Fear appeals. Is it ever appropriate to use fear appeal to get somebody to do something by scaring them? And we kind of touched on this earlier, I believe, but sweeps week on TV, terrorism, immigrants, outsourced overseas production, exotic diseases, ailments that require prescription drugs, crime and violence. The biggest one to me would be stay out of the ocean because of sharks. I grew up in Ventura. I remember we went and saw the movie Jaws for the first time in 75 or 76. We did not go to the beach or go in the water for quite a while after that. But anyway, is it justified? And I think would say sometimes yes. And we kind of touched on that earlier. Ethics and emotional appeals. The authors would say that a persuasion is more ethical when it uses central processing rather than peripheral processing. So you can use both, but they would say central processing methods are better. They wouldn't say wrong or right per se, but better. And using both and, it would be the best method of trying to persuade somebody. They also throw in there, though, even though emotional appeals are more peripheral, they can also be inspiring, and we never want to leave that out that they give. A couple of examples of Martin Luther King, the I Have a Dream speech, as well as coaches using emotional appeals to inspire their teams. Certainly would not ignore those or say don't use those methods of emotional appeals. Ingratiation. The bottom line is if you're trying to suck up to somebody by telling them they're great, they're smart, they're better, they're funnier, they're all these things, if you honestly believe it, great, tell them. But if you're just doing it to persuade them to do something on your behalf, to like you, to hire you, to give you a better situation. They talk about those who use ingratiation with their bosses tend to enjoy a 5% advantage when it comes to employee performance reviews. Should you do that? I don't know. If you believe it, and if it's honest, and if it's not just out of the blue, then I guess that would be fine to do. I try to encourage people through telling them things I appreciate about them and not just making things up. But if I see it, try to encourage them. And some people, it does, uplift them and makes them have a great day just by telling them something you genuinely appreciate about them. So, in other words, don't be stingy with your compliments, but don't just make them up to persuade them to do something you want to do. And I think this is our last slide. Oh no, I got one more. The ethics of visual persuasion. And again, the bottom line here is images, because they lack definition in themselves. People are left to their own devices to figure out what an image is trying to say. Then we want to choose language. I said this earlier, language-based persuasion over image-based persuasion, but the best is do both. There's a picture in the textbook, and I don't think they commented on this, but I think it was in one of my textbooks when I was in school, same picture, of the child with the vulture. And there's that imagery to say, the child there who is starving to death, and this vulture is just going to come pick the bones clean of this dead child who starved to death. But what they don't tell you is the picture of the child. Then they took the picture of the vulture and superimposed it on the other picture. So it's a dishonest picture, but they never tell you that when it was originally presented, and it makes a much more grim, starvation is horrible in itself, but this kind of ups the ante by adding that vulture into the picture where that wasn't an original picture that was taken. It was enhanced and altered. So how much of a difference does that make? If it increases giving to charitable organizations to present a picture like that, is that right, fair, or good? Even if it gets more money, is that fair to do? So anyway, just something to think about. Now our last slide of subliminal influence. The point is the authors think they don't work, and they're not overly concerned, they say, but it's a matter of principle. So, but then it's also kind of this thing like, we don't think they work, there's no research that shows they work, but just in case they might work a little bit, we want to put our statement in here. We want to throw in our weight on the matter. And so the question is, should they be allowed? Should they be regulated? Should somebody be keeping an eye on this, or say, we know it doesn't work, go ahead and do what you want, it doesn't matter? It's kind of like shooting bullets at Superman and they just bounce off. It really doesn't matter. And then, do online subliminal messages pose any risk? Maybe I would think that in the category of being able to verify their claims with accurate research, should that have to be presented? Well, not everybody else does that when they sold although I'll tell you one that didn't end up working. You remember all the copper-based products, the bracelets and the shirts and the pull-on things over your knees or elbows? They had to stop advertising, saying that it was the copper infusion that made them work so well because they couldn't prove it or back it up. They had to change the advertising. Now I love it as they do it, and they always have somebody stating in these commercials, they still have the same product, but they can't say it's the copper, but they'll have somebody say, if you ever hear it, I don't know what makes it work, I don't know why it works, but it works. So they've taken out the copper statement and replaced it with, I don't know why, but it works. So supposedly that, we're still supposed to figure out it's the copper that makes it work. But anyway, so that's the last presentation. Okay, so that wraps up our textbook and wraps up chapter 16 on ethics. And I'm hoping that we do approach ethics both being the presenters of when we are trying to persuade others, as well as the receivers and potential clients or even victims of others' persuasion, that this chapter would help us to be more on target. All right, thank you.